What if I told you that keeping your hard-earned money completely safe in a normal bank account is actually one of the most dangerous, financially destructive things you can possibly do in 2026? I know how that sounds. It sounds completely backwards. But through years of helping people detangle their finances, I have seen the exact same heartbreaking mistake made over and over and over again. Right now, there are hundreds of billions of dollars sitting in low-interest checking and savings accounts. Half of all Americans have thousands of dollars sitting in these accounts, and the people holding that money feel incredibly proud of themselves. They log into their banking app, they see the balance growing, and they think, I am being so responsible, I am doing the right thing. But the complete opposite is true. If you are keeping all of your savings in a normal bank, you are actively losing money every single day, and you are completely unaware that it is happening. If you are watching this and you just felt a wave of panic or guilt, I need you to take a deep breath and let it go right now. This is not your fault. I need you to hear that. It is not your fault. You are exhausted. You are working overtime. You are dealing with difficult bosses. You are sacrificing your evenings and your weekends just to scrape together some savings. You put in the literal blood, sweat, and mental energy to make that money. You did the hardest part, but you feel like you are drowning because the system is completely rigged to keep you in the dark. We are living in an economy where the cost of eggs, rent, and electricity has absolutely exploded. Yet our wages have barely moved. Our brains are not wired to understand modern financial systems. We are wired to gather resources and hoard them out of fear. When you hoard cash in a bank account, your brain gets a hit of dopamine. It feels like safety. It feels like a shield against a very scary world. And let's be honest, schools completely failed us. They taught us how to dissect a frog, but they never taught us how the banking system actually makes money off of our fear. They never taught us what to do with the money once we finally earned it. You were handed a blindfold and dropped into a financial maze. So please, do not beat yourself up for hitting a dead end. Validate your anxiety. It is real, and it makes perfect sense. But today, we take the blindfold off. Let's talk about the hidden truth that wealthy people understand, but regular, hardworking people are never taught. The paradigm shift is this. Cash is the laziest worker you will ever hire. Think about what happens when you put $10,000 into a regular bank account. You worked incredibly hard for that money, but once it hits that account, it just sits there. It clocks out. It takes a nap. It does absolutely nothing to help you build a better life. You check that account a year later, and it's still just $10,000. But here is the terrifying part. Not only did that lazy cash not create any new money for you, but it is actually worth significantly less than it was a year ago. Even though the number on your screen looks the exact same, you can buy way less with it. The financial industry loves to use the word inflation to make things sound complicated. They talk about CPI and economic indexes. Let me translate inflation into plain English. Inflation is an invisible thief that breaks into your bank account every single night and shaves a tiny microscopic sliver off of your money. You can't see the thief, and the number in your account doesn't change, but when you go to the grocery store, suddenly the same box of cereal costs $3 more. Your money lost its power. That is what happens when you leave it sitting motionless in a bank. Wealthy people do not let their money sit on the couch. They give every single dollar a job. They force their money to put on a hard hat, go out into the world, and bring back more money. This brings us to one of the biggest psychological traps keeping you broke, the emergency fund trap. I know exactly what you are thinking, but I need an emergency fund. Everyone says I need an emergency fund. Yes, you absolutely do. But the psychology of fear makes us hoard way too much. The point of an emergency fund is purely for a worst-case scenario. If you lost your job tomorrow, do you have enough to cover your core living expenses? Your rent, your basic groceries, your minimum bills, so you don't end up on the street when you strip away the restaurants, the shopping, and the fun stuff. Your core living expenses are usually way lower than you think. You only need 3 to 6 months of those bare-bones expenses saved. That is your emergency fund, nothing more. I see people with $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 sitting in a normal checking account, terrified to touch it, calling it an emergency fund. That is not an emergency fund. That is fear money. And keeping all that fear money lumped together in one account leads to another massive psychological trap, the illusion of wealth. Having too much cash sitting in your checking account actually tricks your brain into spending more money. Think about it. You open your app on a Friday night, You see $15,000 sitting there, and your brain immediately goes, oh, I have loads of money, I am rich. So you buy those shoes you've been looking at. You order expensive takeout instead of cooking. You book a weekend trip. But that $15,000 wasn't spending money. It was your emergency safety net because it was all lumped into one place sitting right in front of your eyes. It felt like permission to spend. You have to get that money out of your sight. So what do we do instead? If keeping it in the bank is destroying our wealth, where does it go? We invest it. And specifically, I want to talk about something called a dividend ETF. Again, no jargon. Let's translate. Imagine you want to buy a business, but you don't have millions of dollars. An ETF, or an exchange-traded fund, is basically a massive basket of the best companies in the world, instead of trying to guess which single company is going to do well, which is basically gambling. You buy the whole basket. Now, a dividend ETF is a very special type of basket. It is filled with incredibly stable, massive companies that have a long history of making huge profits. And because you own a tiny piece of those companies, they literally pay you a portion of their profits every 3 months, just for holding onto the basket. That payment is called a dividend. It is literally companies paying you rent for using your money. Let's look at the real math. Let's look at the aha moment that will completely change how you view your future. Let's take scenario A, the average path. You have $10,000. You worked hard, you saved it, and you leave it in a normal bank account earning 0% over 10 years. That lazy cash does absolutely nothing. It stays at exactly $10,000. But because of the invisible thief of inflation, that $10,000 now only has the buying power of about $7,000. You went backwards. You lost nearly a third of your hard work just by trying to play it safe. Now scenario B, the wealth logic path. Instead of a normal bank account, you take that same $10,000 and you put it to work in a diversified dividend ETF that generates, let's say, an average 8% return per year. After year 1, your lazy money went out and recruited $800 new dollars. You now have $10,800. In year 2, it is not just your original money working. Those $800 new dollars put on hard hats too. Now, you have $11,664. This is compound interest. It is the 8th wonder of the world. It is money making money, which then makes more money. If you leave that money alone for 10 years, your $10,000 grows to over $21,000. You more than doubled your money. You made over $11,000 in pure, unadulterated free money. You didn't have to sacrifice a single evening. You didn't have to work a single weekend. Your money did the heavy lifting for you. And here's where it gets incredibly powerful for the everyday person. You don't need a huge lump sum to start. Let's focus on the micro. What if you literally start from zero today, but you find a way to redirect just $50 a week? $50 a week is a couple of coffees, maybe a canceled subscription, or packing your lunch a few times. It is completely manageable. If you automate that $50 a week into a dividend ETF and never look at it, the math explodes. Over 20 years, you will have put in about $52,000 of your own money. But because of the compounding growth in those dividends being reinvested, your account will be worth around $130,000 over 30 years. You put in $78,000 out of your own pocket, your account over $310,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars in free wealth, generated simply because you refuse to let your money sit lazily in a bank. Now, I know exactly what your inner voice is screaming right now. But what if the market crashes? What if I lose it all? This is the most common fear in the world, and it is 100% valid. We all remember 2008. We remember the panic of 2020. But I need you to completely reframe how you view a market crash. When you are a long-term investor, a market crash is not a catastrophe. It is a clearance sale. If you walk into your favorite clothing store and the manager announces that everything is 40% off, you don't run out of the store screaming in terror. You buy everything you can hold because you know the clothes are valuable and you are getting a massive discount. The stock market is the only place on earth where people panic when things go on sale. When the market drops, those incredible companies in your dividend ETF didn't vanish. They are just on sale. If you are consistently investing your $50 a week, you are now buying way more shares for the exact same price. Historically, the stock market has always recovered, 100% of the time. The only people who actually lose money in a crash are the ones who let their fear take over and sell their investments at the bottom. If you just leave it alone, you ride the wave back up, and the shares you bought on sale explode in value. But there is a very important rule here. You only invest money you do not need for the next 5 years. The stock market is incredibly volatile in the short term. Your $10,000 might drop to $8,000 next month before climbing to $12,000 a year later. If you are saving for a house deposit or a wedding that is happening in 2 years, you cannot afford that volatility. That short-term money belongs in cash, but not in a normal bank. This leads us perfectly into the idiot-proof 3-step blueprint that you can execute tonight from your phone while sitting on your couch. The barrier to entry here is practically zero. Step 1, calculate and move your emergency fund. Figure out exactly what your bare-bones living expenses are for 3 to 6 months. Write that number down. Now, open a high-yield savings account online. Normal banks give you 0.01%. High-yield savings accounts give you around 4 to 5% right now. Move your exact emergency fund amount into that account. It keeps it safe from market crashes. It earns enough interest to fight off inflation. And most importantly, it gets it out of your main checking account, so you stop treating it like spending money. Step 2, the 5-year rule bucket. Do you have a big life event coming up in the next 5 years? A down payment on a car, a wedding, a move across the country? Calculate how much you need for that specific goal and put that cash into a separate high-yield savings account or a certificate of deposit. Do not invest this money. Keep it safe. Keep it earning 4% or 5% and protect it from short-term market dips. Step 3, the wealth automation machine. Any dollar you have left over after your emergency fund and your 5-year goals needs to go to work. Open a brokerage account, look for a broad, low-cost dividend ETF or an S&P 500 index fund. And here is the secret to making this work. Automate it. Set up the system so that the moment your paycheck hits your bank account, a specific amount, whether that is $50 a week or $500 a month, is automatically transferred into your investment account before you even see it. Out of sight, out of mind. You remove human error. You remove the temptation to spend it. Your wealth builds quietly in the background while you go out and live your life. Listen to me. If you have watched this video up to this point, I need you to understand something very profound. The fact that you sat through a deep dive on behavioral finance and compound math means you are already ahead of 90% of the population. Most people will never confront their financial anxiety. Most people will leave their money rotting in a normal bank account for their entire lives, wondering why they can never get ahead. You are breaking the cycle today. You now know the real math. You understand the psychology that was holding you back. You have the exact steps to fix it. There is no shame in where you are starting. The only mistake is staying frozen. Take 15 minutes tonight, calculate your numbers, open that high-yield account, and give your money a job. You are building a wall of security around yourself and your family that no one can ever tear down.